Welcome back to Tools and Track. Sit rep. We're in the height of winter, the hoodie is back in fashion, and this is no different to what it was the last time. But that's not really fair, because there is still progress to be had, and whilst there is no engine here, there is still things brewing in the mix. Now let's get a catch up on what I've managed to do while you've been away. The first thing, you'll notice as well that this is now just like storage for all the projects that aren't getting worked on. First things first, head. Now the last time we were working on the Supra, the head was more or less stripped and absolutely barking. Well, it's now still more or less stripped, but clean. We've got this steam washed along with the sump, so that at least is ready to go. Now we'll come back to this head shortly, but the first thing I want to discuss in this episode is we have been buying things, and this kind of punctuates the main reason why we've not had a lot of progress. The first bit of the big bill has arrived. Apparently unboxings are a thing on the internet, so we'll have a wee look inside here. And as you can see, we have brought pistons. That's the 0.5 overs that we were looking for. What do you get in a Carrillo piston kit? A receipt for the eye-watering amount of money this was. There's your gudgeon ping rings, so they'll be handy when we put the engine together. In each of the 6 locations we've got this. Now this is piston rings, so we won't open these up because it'll cause me carnage and hell and problems at the moment, but the real money shot, the reason why we're all here, is as follows. Those are some nice looking billet things, aren't they? Let's see if we can get one out. That is, I mean, to be honest, it's been a 4-week wait for this to arrive, but I mean the quality in these guys is just incredible. It's a shame that you will never actually be able to see this when it's in the engine, but even just look at the machine work on the face of the crown, and yeah, these are very, very, very nice. So the reason why these are the first things to arrive is the block. So the block is currently at a machine shop, and the overbore is going to have to be happening. So what we tried in the first instance with the block was a glaze bust, or like just a hone, to see if that would take the scoring out. And it won't at all. It is so deep that a hone is not even looking twice at it. So it's going to need an overbore. So we're going to go 0.5 over on the bores. So these pistons here are 0.5mm oversized. So the normal pistons are 86mm, these are 86.5 width. So the reason that these are needed first is because the machine shop wants the pistons to make sure that the amount of metal they're taking out is the exact amount that they're taking out. Which makes sense, I can't really argue with that logic. So next step for us, we're going to have to take these to the machine shop where the block currently sitting. They're going to finish the works on this, and then what we'll get back is the pistons and the block. So in this episode, once that all comes back and it's nicely machined, we're going to then gap the rings using the pistons, get that all ready to be assembled. We'll do a bit more work in the head, get that ready to be, I don't know, whatever. We'll get into a bit more head diagnostics in a minute. But once all that's done, the rings are all gapped and it's ready to go, the next thing we can start looking at is building this forge block up. So that then means I need to spend more money. Now you might think I'm milking this, and what do you mean money? These alone were £1,000. So, like, believe me, this isn't a cheap endeavour. But I will say this, that is the most expensive part of the forging build. The pistons are kind of the things. So the next things we need to get to do the forging, considering my crank is okay, will be the rods, the ACL bearings, and the main bolts, so ARP, mains, and I guess whatever else is ARP to make a short block. So we'll get into all that as well for the moment. But first things first, let's get these to work. So for you guys, that was like 20 seconds worth of montage. For me, it's been 6 weeks. 4 weeks waiting for the pistons, and then a further 2 weeks for this. Now you might wonder, well, why did we have the additional 2 weeks? Because the pistons are needed so that we can bore out the block. Now, surely you think, well, they were 86mm, why not just bore the block out to 86.5? There's a bit more tolerance involved when you're building an engine. And the machine shop wanted the pistons so that they could accurately make sure that they're gapped to the bore
That's not just 86.5, that's 86.514 or whatever, and then they have to measure the difference to make sure this is machined exactly right. It doesn't end there. The machining has to be completely parallel. So that means it's gapped on these edges all the way down concentric, because if that varies inwards and outwards, it means we're going to get flex in the piston rings and it's never going to seal right. Building an engine takes patience, lots of it. So what's next on the list for this guy? Well, it's absolutely filthy, so we need to go put it in a bath. Not my bath, a proper machine bath.
But before I go, those that may not know about engines may question the fact that this doesn't look nice and polished. That's because your bores can't be. If they're nice and polished, the rings are just dragging the oil off and it doesn't bed in. Those scory marks, it's called honing, and it is essential to keep oil retention and make sure that when the piston goes up and down the bore, it's well lubricated. Most folk watching this probably know that, but if you didn't, now you do. So that's exactly the finish we want, and it's honed to perfection, so really happy. Right, in at the boot, let's go for a bath.
Okay, so we're straight out of a hot bath and it is now looking quite clean, which is a good start. This is obviously stage one of building an engine. Get a nice clean fresh block, that's a good base to build on. Now that it's clean, we're obviously going to be doing a lot of work on this and it's going to take me several weeks. So in order to stop any flash off, I'm going to coat it all in, not WD but actually WD-40. WD, of course, water dispersant. What it'll do is not just give it a little coating on here that will stop rust flashing off, it'll also stop any moisture that's possibly still sitting in here from the hot bath, sitting around and making more rust. So, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Anything that we're not going to paint, we're going to cover in this. So I've actually just given it a rundown of brake cleaner, just to make sure that any of the WD-40 I've put on all the other stuff is dispersed. We're going silver. Remember in the Fast and the Furious when Jesse said there was something about engines that calms them down? I don't think he was talking about scraping off the previous head gasket from a block. Right, back to Tools and Track University. Not done the whiteboard for a while, but we are building an engine here and it's going to be not stock. So there are some things we need to consider. Now as we've got the block ready to assemble and we've got our pistons here, the first thing we're going to look at is making sure the pistons fit. Rings, lad, and I don't mean donuts. We need to actually make sure that the piston rings going in are going to be correct for the task. So our piston ring fits in this groove of the piston, and as you would probably guess, it's shaped like a ring. So within the ring, you have a gap. Makes sense? That gap will compress once it's fitted in the bore and sit more or less flush against the piston. But the gap that we may need to alter is this guy here. Now, these will be slightly to the tight side when they're supplied, but because we've machined the bore out and the piston is to a set manufactured size, there could be a bit of a tolerance difference here. So the gapping of this ring just gives us a bit more tightness and a bit more slackness depending on what's needed. And it means that the ring and the piston sit snug in the bore. As it happens though, the fettling is more or less defined by the piston manufacturer using the supplied manual. Normally, being a man, I would bin these, but as it happens, there is a considerable amount of stuff in here that we need to pay attention to. So determining the ring gap, first of all, it says all bores must be converted to inches to do the math. Thanks, America. Incredibly, this instruction manual goes into some disgusting amount of detail. So, Carrillo cylinder honing recommendations for gas nitride CPN and RH, G and HD piston rings, there is an actual surface finish guide and honing degree guide for how this is actually meant to be done. Wow, the wet cast iron blocks. 0.016. So if we do need to adjust the gap of the ring, it would be tempting to just get the angle grinder out and do my best, but as luck would have it, there is actually a tool for this. See, attached piston ring gap tool. And all this is a grinding wheel with a little arm to turn it and 2 pins here. And what the pins do is when you put the ring in and compress it, it pulls it in to exactly where it needs to be on the stone, and then you will run the stone around it, take a little tiny gap off, recheck it, lather, rinse, repeat several times until you have exactly the ring gap. Right, something else just occurred to me. We've got more than one piston ring. So common sense dictates that the bottom one, which is going to be the oil scraper, this swirly one, that's got 2 very, very thin retaining rings. Now if we put all those together, that goes in the bottom. Next up, we have 2 thicker ones. Now, this is also easy because they can only go in the 2 above ones. They can only go in one way because the darker of the 2 is thicker than the silver one. Like so. So if I was to try and do it the other way around, the darker one's not going in there, the silver one is far too slack. Common sense, you. Right, you know the old measure twice, cut once idea? Now, it was a wee bit gung-ho earlier on when I said, oh look, bore size times 0.05 equals 0.016 of an inch, and I was like, oh, that must be it. 0.016 is the minimum allowable clearance. Except it's not, that's an example. There's a table, and the thing that triggered that was, surely all the rings aren't the same. They're not. Different sizes for the top ring, the second ring and the oil ring, and different gaps depending on your application. So for street stroke high performance, we measure the bore and multiply it by like 0.0045 of an inch. However, if it's for drag racing or road racing, 0.005 rather than 45. And if we're going the nitrous turbo supercharged, it's 0.0055. Right, but it's already turbocharged, so I think we're going to have to go with the turbo. Well, yeah, obviously we're going to have to go with the turbocharged, aren't we? Because, mate, this is only like the first episode as well. Now, another thing that these instructions say is all bores must be converted to inches. And I was like, I'm sorry, what level of Yankee Doodle arrogance is this? Why do we have to go back to black and white? Because all of their calculations are in inches. And this has actually caught NASA out before. Google it, you'll see what I mean. And I was about to go, do you know what, I don't really care, I'm going to just do it in metric. But I'm going to do my calculations in inches, and I'm going to actually have to do the vast majority of the checking in inches as well. If you start converting back and forward, thinking that it's easier to work in decimal, you're going to have problems. If everything's listed here in inches, just do it in inches, because the conversion is just adding another step and another chance for the failure. we're almost at the halfway mark. I've done cylinder 1 and cylinder 2, and here are my observations so far. The first ring, i.e. the one closest to the combustion chamber, has always needed a skim. The second, however, and the oil rings are fine, as in they actually measure perfectly. Now, ordinarily I'd be like, fine, carry on, but we are doing fairly precision stuff right now. It just seems a bit odd that it's only the primary ring that's needing a skim and the other two are okay. So what I'm going to do in this instance is carry on, because there's no doubt that the top rings are needing skims because that measurement is right. I've triple checked it. But I'm going to just store the second ring and the oiling rings and come back to it. I'm going to do a double check. I may have missed some and I don't want to just dismiss this and potentially have an issue. So go away, have a think, come back to it, double check your work is going to be the sensible way to do it. So I'm going to carry on, do the other 4, and then literally 24 hours later, come and double check my work. Right, we're day 2. I went home and had a sleep and I think about it. And I'm now making a decision that I'm converting to metric. Sorry, Carrillo, I don't care what you say. I'm happier using metric. All of my measurement tools are metric, including my feeler gauges and my mic. So we're running it in metric because having to convert back and forward every time we take a measurement and set the feelers up is going to cause me a problem. So what I've done is fresh, straight in the door, worked out the metric measurements. So if I'm looking for 176 thou on the first ring's gap, that's 0.447 of a millimetre. So that is my first measurement. Now bear in mind that that's going to be the same for all the pistons. We're quite happy with that. If this is correct, we then go an extra 5 thou over, which is 0.574 of a millimetre, which you can also work out, and our oil rings are always going to be 0.460 of a millimetre. I'm just going to run to that, get close to it, take them all out and recheck them. And I think that's the way to make sure we're consistent. Obviously, as well, as you've noticed, I'm doing 1 per cylinder. I'm marking it for that cylinder and I'm using the piston that's going in that cylinder, and we're keeping it all in its own little segment because, well, there could be variances between the cylinders and I don't want to introduce further errors. So, therefore, we're on cylinder 3. Now we're getting close to where the feeler gauge wants to slip in, but it's still just a wee bit tight. So what I'm doing every time is I'm taking it back out. We're giving it just the lightest of skims because you don't want to take too much off. I'm making sure that I'm taking an equal length off of each side. And we're being light on the touch on the grinding wheel, not too heavy. In fact, you can hear it barely touching on every rotation. And then we take it off there and we're wary that there's going to be grinding dust on this. So that needs to be wiped off. Why? Because if the dust sits on the edge of the ring, it can sit between the ring and the bore and it'll make it feel tighter than what it actually is. When you take it back out and take more off, you don't actually need more off. And then you slip it in, making sure that the bores still look clean. There's grit there, we'll wipe that down and clean it. Then we're taking the piston, crown to the top of the block, then rotate it 90 degrees, making sure it feels like it's exactly right. Because if the ring sits off, that gap might increase and it'll drop in and then we'll go great. Until we actually go and check it again and find it's tight. So it's got to be level. Then we clean off the feeler gauges every time because there might be schmutz on that that'll stop it going in. And voila, we are now at size. That will then get a double check, but for the moment we can take it out, stick it in the box, start on ring 2. So yeah, this takes patience. I'm halfway through and I'm already wishing I hadn't begun. I've noticed on all of these, in fact this is about the tightest I've got yet. I could endure a skim, the lightest of touches off of that, but it's only ever been the first ring that's needing a cut. The rest of them are fine. And it stands to reason, I guess, that the top ring is going to be the most variable because it's the tightest tolerance, but I don't know. I've double and triple checked that, I'm definitely doing the right thing. If any engine builders are still watching this without screaming, "You're doing it wrong," and want to hit me up in the comments as to why it's only seemed to be the top ring that needs a skim, I'm all ears. Anyway, on to the oil rings. So that's our pistons gapped, ready to go in. I've moved this into the kind of cleaner area at the moment because out there's going to be some grinding going on. I don't really want to have excess dust hitting that if I don't need to. So that'll wrap up for the moment. In the next episode for this guy, obviously we are going to have to spend even more money, and probably more than what I've already spent, to get it to a rotating short block. We'll come to that the next time. In the meantime, everyone running up the side of the screen, they're Patreons. They do help support the channel. If you want to know what that's about, patreon.com/toolsandtrack, help a brother out. If not, like, subscribe, bell, all that nonsense, because that's the only way we grow. And I will see you next week. Until then, drive safe, guys.